It is my great honor and pleasure to introduce the extraordinary, accomplished individual, the Dean of Columbia Business School in New York, Dr. Costis Maglaras. I like it. Let's start from the beginning. As you can read in the brochure, Dean Maglaras is a native of Greece, who has studied in both Athens and London, and is now the 16th Dean of Columbia Business School and the David and Lynn Silfen Professor of Business at Columbia University. Columbia Business School is a global institution with an MBA class representing 6 continents and 61 countries. It was established in 1916 and is one of the 6 Ivy League business schools and one of the oldest business schools in the world. I know it well because I went to the University of Chicago along with George here, and we were always competitors. Dr. Maglaras' specialty is in the interface between applied mathematics, economics, and engineering in academia and industry. He has been awarded for his teaching courses in the MBA and PhD programs. Outside of the business school, his experience has been focused on financial technology, asset management and markets, and in digital technology, with a long-standing collaboration with Goldman Sachs Global Markets Division, focusing on quantitative research and equity trading. This is really hard stuff, right? I think back to my finance class. I don't know how I got through it. He presides over the new spectacular Columbia Business School campus in Manhattanville, which opened in January of 2022, and which has been hailed as both a beautiful, bustling academic village and a gateway to New York City. As one recent article stated, located just a few blocks north of Columbia University, the school provides unmatched access to engage and connect with prominent business leaders and dynamic influencers from around the world. It is part of a 17-acre campus. The dean himself had said that the new space, modern business practice, is increasingly collaborative and non-siloed and is predicated on an expanded adoption of technology, data, and advanced analytics alongside the fundamentals of traditional business education. Our new open light-filled spaces reflect this reality, creating a truly collaborative and immersive experience that is unique to Columbia Business School and ideal for a curriculum that prioritizes team and interdisciplinary work, acting as a nexus across the university and beyond in areas including digital transformation, healthcare, climate change, and the interface between business and society. I feel great pride in presenting to you a fellow Hellene, a leader for today, and guide to the future, Dr. Dean Costis Maglaras. Please come up.
Let me start. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to offer my sincere thanks for this distinction, be allowed to come and talk to you. Simply put, I'm humbled by that, and I want to thank Your Eminence, Archbishop Elpidophorus, for your vision, for all that you do, and for your trust to be allowing me to address this body here. I want to thank all the members of Leadership 100. I want to thank the board. I want to thank Jim for the graceful introduction, and Paulette for all that you've been doing. And it is a great honor to be recognized and to be allowed to sort of speak to this group alongside many, many very distinguished Greeks, Greek Americans, and Philhellene leaders that have actually done so through the years. And this is sort of truly a big distinction. Now, it is, of course, and I want to digress a little bit, an extra honor to be receiving an award by the Archbishop's Leadership 100 organization, in part recognizing at a personal level how important Ecclesia, Orthodoxy Thrischia, our church, our religion, our faith has played in our own personal journeys as it has done in mine. It was very difficult to avoid that if you were growing up in Greece in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, which was my experience, my lived experience. But so I'm going to do two things. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think are important topics that keep me up at night, so to speak, at leading the business school at Columbia. And then I'm going to weave in a little bit some of my own passions in research, like that Jim was alluding to earlier. I'm not going to use math, and it's not a good time to use math right after lunch and a big dessert. I skipped mine, but I'm going to delve in both of these, and I'm going to digress, even though I'm not going to focus on that, and add something that we heard in the talk that we just had from Carl about an hour ago, and it had to do with social networks and social media. This actually happens to be an area that I've been working on for 15 years, how information diffuses over social networks. So that's like, I like to call myself an expert in that area, and if I was giving a research talk, that would have been the topic that I would have selected today. And I would have done that because I think, first of all, after 2.5 years of COVID, we're all experts in the spread of epidemics, and this is not very different than the spread of information over networks, social networks. So the math is the same, and in some sense, understanding a little bit about it is also similar. But I actually think it's very important thing for us to study when we're thinking about our own society, when we're thinking about the polarization that exists right now, and when we're thinking of our youth. I actually have this discussion with my kids that are teenagers all the time, just to understand how they're being targeted and how sort of technology is actually affecting their lived experience. And understanding how control, intervention, in some sense, from a platform, from a government, healthcare intervention that we were getting in the past, really affects the spread of information, but it also affects the spread of a virus, right? So this is the parallel. And we now, going back to the discussion we had about an hour and a half ago, we live in a society where many people, possibly even some in here, although I'm looking at the age group here, and I think maybe all of us sort of read and learn about news by going to our favorite newspapers. Some of us may actually even get them in paper. But there are about 150 million people in this country alone that receive their news through a personalized feed that comes to their device every day. Okay? They do not read a newspaper. They certainly don't buy a paper newspaper. So they consume news. That's a sort of sociological change. They consume news through their own device, not by going through sort of reputable, let's say, outlets. We also live in a world where powerful algorithms can actually tweak and personalize in a very fine way the news that actually get directed to your phone, just for you, and sometimes in a good way, but also oftentimes in order to possibly affect your own opinion, okay? So this is exciting, one would say, interesting, economically meaningful for some, but it is also deeply problematic and risky, and this is something that at least occupies me in thinking in my own research about how to think about that and how to potentially try to not just control it, but understand all of the phenomena that go with that. So I thought the discussion in the morning was actually alluded to that issue, and I think that's a real issue that sort of pertains to our society today. I'll stop my little vignette here because I have a few others, and I'll lose you in the way. So two broad topics, my dual interest in leadership at Columbia, and as Jim was saying, my interest in research that is really on that interface between applied mathematics, engineering, and economics and business, okay? And I will weave some of these themes, but I'll try to talk primarily about the future. Now, I want to start literally from the beginning, and how did I actually come here? And my unlikely path of being here, of course, Carl had an even more unlikely path, being a Navy SEAL and a commander in Afghanistan. But I started in Athens. I was born there. I was raised in Athens. And I grew up, and somewhere along the way, I developed a love for learning. It was a somewhat biased love for learning. I wasn't a good student in everything that I touched, but I really liked math, and I was pretty good at it. And then that sort of led to what happened in the future. I grew up also in a typical, I would say, connected, warm family setting in Athens. And as I was mentioned earlier, also one that was close to Ecclesia in an inescapable way. As a young kid, sometimes we're trying more often how to escape our having to go to church on a Sunday rather than running to it. But that was Kutala effect, of course. We have all experienced that. But also through our schools and our educational system back in Greece. So my first stop after I left Athens, I went to London. I studied electrical engineering. I was just talking to George a little bit about that. I then moved to Stanford to also study electrical engineering. And my interest evolved over time, and somehow I landed in a business school, and I'll explain a little bit about it. But the ability when you enter an academic career, and I don't know whether we have other academics in the audience right now, is that you have the ability to sort of twist and turn as your interests evolve over time. So, that's a privilege, and I've had the ability to do that. It makes for difficult people to manage, George, as you know, right? But due to our presence in Arizona, I'll tell you what I was doing about 35 years ago. I may be one of the few people in the audience here that I have designed and fabricated their own chip. Semiconductor industry is a huge industry. I was working a little bit in that, and much activity is happening in that very industry just a few miles from where we are right now, and probably we'll keep reading about it every other day, because that's a strategic area of focus for this country and for the world. I then started, during that time, pivoting in an area called control theory. That's on the mathematical end of electrical engineering. You should think, rockets, missile guidance systems, airplane autopilots, robotics. These were the things that I was doing. And I was sort of entering that field during the end of the Cold War at Stanford. So there was a lot of research happening in that space. That was my area. Had I not gone to Stanford, just to talk about happy decision that I actually moved out of Imperial, I would have worked on a topic. Jim was having a hard time saying the words on some of the things that I was working on. The next one is even harder. I would have worked on control of plasma flows of tokamak reactors. If these words mean nothing, that's fine. So it turns out tokamak reactors are the prevailing technology that we're trying to use to achieve nuclear fusion. Okay? And that was a promising area in the early 90s. It turns out it continues to be almost at the same level, because we haven't actually done that much in the last 32 and a half, 33 years. But we had a very positive piece of news about fusion about 6 weeks ago. So this has been a frustratingly hard problem to solve, and I'm happy I moved out of it because not that much progress was done in the early 90s in that problem. So I stayed in control, and instead I moved into studying something that we all know right now, and is decentralized communication networks, and in particular something that we call TCP/IP. You may have heard that term. This is how computers interact with each other. And at that point in time, we were debating in the scientific community whether our communication network, our ability to communicate, should happen over a decentralized network. So if you think about the airline network, most of us got on a plane to come here. The airline network is a centrally controlled network. There is a brain that kind of knows where the planes are at any point in time. We don't communicate like that. It turns out that a communication network is completely decentralized. There is no central brain that knows how information flows between users. And at that point in time, the scientific community was debating whether that sounds like a crazy idea or a good idea, right? Is it going to be robust? Is it going to be scalable? How the different components are going to interoperate with each other? It was going to be based on something called ARPANET. ARPANET was the communication network that was actually devised primarily by the US government as a Cold War device to be able to communicate between military bases if we were under attack and some of these nodes actually sort of stop being operational. It turns out the answer to that question about whether it was a good idea is a resounding yes. Our network is decentralized. There is no common owner. It's decentralized in terms of ownership, in terms of control. It has grown exponentially over the past 3 decades. It works so well, like the electricity that flies out of the wall every time you plug in something, that we never question, right, how our phones work, whether they work well, et cetera. It's ubiquitous. I digressed for a reason. How many people here own crypto? Is there anybody here that owns crypto? Okay, some. Good. So I digress intentionally because our scientific community right now is actually debating something similar, and that is 30 years later, we're actually asking ourselves, can blockchain technology, decentralized blockchain technology, be the backbone of, let's say, how we reimagine software design, how the internet should work, how potentially, decentralized or programmable finance is going to sort of work, and whether we should use centralized and authenticated databases, or whether we should store information, for example, locally and just pull it in a trusted way whenever we need it. Or whether we need to go through a trusted intermediary, somebody we trust, like a bank or somebody else, or a government. Or whether we should actually use what we call a technological verification protocol. Now, I'm happy some of you have actually invested in crypto, and I hope that you've done well over the last decade, and you continue to do well over the last 12 months, and in particular over the last 3 months. Now, at the core, and I'm going to sort of make a quick comment here, but at the core, blockchain is a desire to sort of architect a fully decentralized and trustless system. We don't need to trust anyone. The system works by itself. This should strike you as something that is sort of in stark contrast to the very principle and institution that brought us all here together, right? That's an institution that, first of all, has been trusted, has a long-standing history, goes back 2,000 years. It provides common values, common principles for all of us, and it's a constant for all of us on which we build our own personal journeys. Stark difference by the decentralized architecture that many of us, or many I wouldn't put myself in it, are working on. Now, over time, I moved to the business school because I thought it would be a very interesting area to apply a lot of these mathematical tools to study business problems. So that was the sort of the kernel of me moving in 1998 to Columbia University, and I've been sort of blessed to be in a stimulating, collaborative, diverse environment that has allowed me to sort of weave my journey. And my work has shifted, and I would say in the last 15 years, I mostly work in data science and machine learning. That's half of what I do, and some areas of finance that Jim was mentioning earlier on, that's the other half of what I do. So let me talk a little bit about the present. So I'll start by a few comments over the last 4 years, what I've been thinking as dean of the school and the changes that we're seeing. And but before I do that, I'll go back about 100 years. And I would ask, I want to remind all of us, you know, why did we form business schools in the first place about 100 or so years ago? And that was a period where in this country primarily, and then in Europe, large organizations got formed. We went from companies that had 5 or 10 or 15 employees to companies that had 1,000 and then 10,000 and then 100,000 employees. And that happened between the, I would say, the late 1800s and 1920, okay? And that required sort of the development of what we would call professional management. It's very hard to manage an organization that has 100,000 employees. So that gave rise to business schools like ours, okay? That period was coined to be called the Second Industrial Revolution, okay? Businesses across the world eventually formed a dynamic of economic activity that which industries were growing, which regions was thriving, and then eventually people followed along. And as a result, businesses over the last 100 years, and in particular over the last 50 years, have been, I would say, one of the major pillars that sort of society evolves around that. They have provided professional opportunities, financial rewards, and they have shaped all of us. And while we're here, due to the institution that has thrived for 2,000 years, it's still important to recognize the crucial role that businesses also play in the fabric of our lives. Now, I want to fast forward now and talk a little bit about the present. If you think about the last 10 years, I think that we have seen tremendously accelerating change. First of all, you know, how we move around, you know, how do we get a car from our phone, the car comes to us, takes us to a destination. Some of us actually own cars that drive themselves. That's incredible. It was impossible just a few years ago. You know, how we monitor our health in real time, how we come up with personalized healthcare treatments, how we generate, distribute, and consume energy, the type of food that we eat. Everything has been changing rapidly. Every industry, every facet of our lives is being challenged, is being disrupted, is being reimagined. Technology, I would say, data, powerful algorithms underpins a lot of that. The other source of connectivity that is the global economy that connects a lot of elements of the economy, and that's something, and brings complexities as we know, but I think that's sort of a key driver. And all together, you know, they have ushered disruption and opportunity across industries, across geographical regions. And all of this appears to be rapid, almost universal, and I would say still early on in its journey. So that thing is not going to stop. And I think it's going to sort of accelerate over time. We have now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this digital future, with a comment about the New Jersey Mafia in a second. I haven't met that mafia yet, but I'll connect to it. But this third industrial revolution is the digital revolution, okay? And I don't know where you think that revolution started, but it started in the beautiful state of New Jersey. Okay, so thank you, New Jersey. It started about 75 years ago. It started at a place called Bell Labs. And it started by the simultaneous invention of two things. The first is the invention of the transistor that led to computers and everything that we now can do with them. And the second was also the simultaneous invention of digital communications. So the first thing is about how we manipulate and store zeros and ones, and the second one is about how we communicate with zeros and ones. And if you think about it, from the late 40s, in the next 75 years, these two things have dramatically changed every aspect of our life, okay? So that's sort of our homage to New Jersey and what they've done for all of us. I'll tell you later on the story about why we have Silicon Valley in California rather than in New Jersey, okay? It's an interesting story by itself. So understanding the intended and unintended consequence of that digital revolution is I think, intriguing, and it's something that we need to sort of work on. I think our economy right now is what I call the algorithmic economy, and we need to understand when we pierce into the future and we think what's going to be happening 5, 10, 20 years into the future, what ways will our lives be changing? Now, I did something, and I'm going to read a paragraph. I haven't been reading my comments word for word, but I'm going to read you the next paragraph, because this morning I went, who knows about ChatGPT in here? Okay, who has tried it? Okay, good. So I went to ChatGPT this morning. It's a computer program, an AI program. And I asked it the question, tell me what you think, write for me a paragraph about the effect of technology over the next 5, 10, 20 years. So here's what it wrote. It says, the next 5 to 10 years, technology is expected to have a profound impact on society. Advancements in AI, the Internet of Things, and 5G are likely to transform various industries such as healthcare, transportation, and manufacturing, making them more efficient and accessible. Additionally, technology will play a crucial role in addressing global challenges such as climate change, food and water security, and energy sustainability. However, the rapid integration of technology into our lives also raises concerns about privacy, cybersecurity, and job placement and displacement. It is crucial for society to proactively manage the impact of technology to ensure that its benefits are distributed equitably and that negative consequences are mitigated. Just a machine wrote that, okay? It's incredible, all right? And I could actually continue and say, can you write that in Shakespearean style? And it would have then just rewrote that back the way Shakespeare was writing, 400 years ago. But it is incredible to think what's happening in the accelerated change. And the ability of this AI module to write that paragraph did not even exist just a few years ago. Okay, this thing is changing exponentially fast. So us thinking about what are the consequences of that is important. So that's part of what I like to do in my day-to-day life. Now, when you ask me, I said New Jersey 75 years ago, digital revolution. If you ask me what's going to change our lives over the next 75 years ago, I'm staring at the Archbishop and I realize 75 years is nothing for the church, right? We need to be thinking in centuries or millennia, and I'm thinking in decades in extremely pedantic and short-sighted way. But if we think about the next 75 years, the remaining of this century, and we ask, what's going to be the sort of agent of change? I think it's going to be, over time, our collective response to climate change. It's going to change energy, it's going to change transportation, it's going to change food, it's going to change how we manufacture goods, it's going to change every aspect of our lives, it's going to change industries, it's going to change the economy, and it's going to create tremendous disruption and opportunity, okay? So I think that is a place where we have a role to play, and that's something that I focus on at the school. Digital revolution, digital future, climate change. I'll mention two other things. First, US-China. We didn't talk about that in the morning, but I'm sure our morning speaker has a lot to say about that. So I think globalization and the period we're going through is a little bit in flux. We're not going to disengage from China because there are sort of extremely strong economic ties, but I think this sort of competitive relationship that we're going to have to navigate between us and China is going to be something that is going to consume us for the time to come. So I think that's important for us to be thinking about. The second, this is one that we did touch upon in the morning, has to do with our society, has to do with polarization, has to do with frictions that we're facing. And in that broad area, I'm not here to address all of it, but I want to ask myself or ourselves, what should businesses be doing? How should businesses and institutions that we represent operate within our system to better society, okay? Because I think that's crucial. We know that religion and our church plays a very big role. In fact, one could argue that religion played the defining role of society for the first, 17 centuries after Christ, and continues to do so. It does so by bringing communities together, by instilling values and principles as an institution, and it's not just the institution. We've heard a lot about sort of the church at the top, but the church within communities. It serves this purpose through its own organization, okay? Because it can affect our local communities. Now, businesses and governments also play a huge role. And I think that's the place that I'm looking and I'm focusing the school. And what should that interplay be between businesses and governments? What problems should governments solve? What problems should businesses solve? And in what way? And how should we interoperate in that period? What's going to happen with the future of work? If this machine is going to be able to write my speech in the not so distant future? We have in this country about 2.5 million people whose job is to answer the phone in a call center. What fraction of these people are going to be employed in the same role in 10 years from now? I don't know, 20% of them? So there's going to be tremendous amount of change. And I think the societal and political narrative is really focusing on that, not very productively, I think, but I do think that that's something that we need to be thinking. So I'll give some closing remarks, and then maybe we'll open it up for some Q&A. But I think, and this is something that relates to Leadership 100 in our community, I asked myself also, and that's a discussion that Jim and I were having a few minutes ago, in what way can we connect the community, but also do something for Greece? So that's another area that I try to be involved through my role right now, and I focus my work in just a few topics. One is technology, the other thing is entrepreneurship, third is climate, the fourth is education, and I'm going to start from education. I was fortunate enough with a couple of friends and some colleagues to spearhead an activity at Columbia University. We opened up a new global center in Athens. We announced it in November, and we don't have a building yet. We're sort of setting up shop, but I think that's going to be interesting for us to be there, and interesting for our colleagues in Greece to foster collaborations, both educational and in research. So hopefully we'll do a lot of that. I worry and I try to sort of promote the investment in technology in Greece, and for those of you that are from that sector, I think we should do more together. I think developing a business ecosystem in tech in general in Greece is important. This is an export business, and I think that can create economic activity that is very much needed in our home country. Human capital, by the way, in Greece is very strong. But it's not really being nurtured very well. So in some sense, if you ask yourself, what is the best time for those of us that went through the Greek educational system, people are at their peak when they enter the university. They're not at that peak when they exit the university, and then 5 years later, it's even worse. This is opposite from what's happening in this country. And somehow we need to sort of reverse that. I work a lot in entrepreneurship, trying to sort of promote it in Greece, and that's something, and climate change and climate, but I'll skip through that. So, you know, it has been a fun journey, it has been a profound journey, from starting with my family, starting with friends. All of my family here in the US is not here today, and is actually not even coming because I have 2 of my kids tested positive for strep. The first one on Monday, and the second one yesterday, last night. So they're all sort of isolating at home in New York. But it's really them, as we've heard from Carl in the morning, that is the driving force of everything that I do. If it wasn't for them, obviously, I wouldn't be having the luxury of doing what I've done. So I'll thank you.